Jason Fladlien here, and it's been said that the media has successfully predicted 72 out of the last 17 recessions. And yeah, that's a bad dad joke. The idea here is everybody's always waiting for the darker, worse times to come along, and everybody runs in fear. And I'm going to tell you right now, we don't have to predict it. We are smack dab, as I record this video, right in the middle of a recession. Now, the real question is it going to get worse? How much worse could it get? And the answer is I don't know, and I don't know. It doesn't matter, though. There are three states that a market resides in. It's either contracting, it's expanding, or it's in equilibrium. 80% of the time, the market is in equilibrium. It's just business as usual. 10% of the time, it's irrationally spreading at a rate that doesn't make sense, that makes a lot of temporarily millionaires. And then it contracts, and a lot of people fall off a cliff. They go from having their best year to having the worst year in their life. So expansion, contraction, equilibrium, it's a story as old as time. What should you do, though, if you are in the middle of a recession? How do you thrive and how do you win in a recession? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. I'm going to break down 7 tips for you. So let's go. Number 1, pretend the recession doesn't exist. See, here's the challenge with a lot of people when they start thinking recession. Recession scares them, and so then they start to become too conservative. They stop taking risks. They change things that used to work because they are afraid that they might not work anymore. Not that they've been proven not to work. They just, on the anticipation that somehow it changes things, they change things that they don't need to change. So they worry too much about what might happen, and then they don't stand time in the present on what they can do right now. So if nothing else, I want you, if you can't do any of these other tips, I want you just to pretend that the recession doesn't exist and say, who am I going to serve? How am I going to help them? How am I going to crush it? Because what I've discovered in business and in life, if it's worth doing even in the worst possible conditions. So sometimes the best thing you can do is to be ignorant and naive to the external weather and create this internal weather in here, this state of resolve, this state of being ready and resourceful. And then you can rock and roll regardless of whether the market's contracting, expanding, or in equilibrium. Tip number 2, sell alternatives to the status quo. So oftentimes in normal markets, status quo, the get by, do the normal things, get the normal results, that can work. It's an illusion because ultimately it will contract and you won't be able to do business as usual. But people cling to this like a security blanket, like if I just keep doing the same thing and don't change anything, somehow it will all work out. So if everybody's doing the same thing, that's a big red clue to not do that. Don't do the status quo. Do anything other than the status quo. Do the opposite of what everybody else is doing. This is the George Costanza principle. So if everybody's lowering their prices now because they're freaked out about the recession, double your prices. And you say, well, Jason, how does that make sense? Well, it doesn't have to make sense for you in order to do it because part of business and part of marketing is standing out. There's also some more psychology here too, is there's always a subsegment of every market who's going to be impervious to a recession, who's going to be looking for the opportunities during a recession, and you should play to them. You don't even have to know that. Just do the opposite, and you're going to be fine. But if everybody's raising their prices, then you lower your prices. So again, the idea here is you stand out. Standing out is always important, but standing out is absolutely essential during a recession. So look at the status quo, know that it's inherently wrong, start doing anything and everything different than the status quo, stick with what works, throw away the rest. I promise you, you will do well during a recession. Tip number 3, emphasize security and safety more. In any marketing or advertising, you might have 50 or 100 or 200 benefits that you could bold, highlight, italicize, underline, and put in somebody's face. But you can't do that. Imagine reading a book where every single word was bolded. Kind of takes away from it, right? When you salt your meal, you can't just put more salt on. More salt doesn't equal better. So you have to know what to salt. You have to be judicious with the benefits that you highlight in any marketing or any sales communication. And so generally, you aren't highlighting security and safety with most offers. There's too blasé of a benefit. There's usually better ones. The exception is during a recession, where people are more focused on the downside and limiting it versus on the upside and maximizing it. And so swing back around and just start adding these words to your sales copy and to your communication a little bit more consciously. So don't just still always talk about the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Talk about how there's going to be higher guards along the way protecting you as you go across the rainbow to get the pot of gold. More safety, more security. So that's if there's any marketing switch of emphasis that I put, it's to highlight more, this is how you're not going to be wiped out. This is how, while you attempt to grow, you're protected in the following ways. So a little bit more emphasis on protection and safety and security, regardless what you're selling. It speaks to the conversation inside the prospect's mind. And that, if nothing else, it gets rapport, but it's also kind of a little bit more important to most people. So now this becomes a benefit that's an A pile benefit versus like a C pile or D pile benefit. Tip number 4, assume the opposite is as true, if not more true. Now, this is tough, and this is something you should get good at no matter what. It doesn't just apply to recessions, but it does seem most applicable during a recession. And I'll give you an example. There was a period of time with televisions where technology changed, where simultaneously the goal was to make the biggest television ever and the smallest television ever. So it either had to be 80 inches and fit on your whole wall, or it had to be so tiny you could put it in your pocket. And both of those things were advantageous, and some people were in the market for literally both of those things, the extremes, the both opposites of an offering. And so I will tell you, in a recession, there is a certain segment of buyers who are more likely to buy than in any other type of market. There's 2 segments of buyers that exist in almost every industry that become even more lucrative and more valuable during the recession, okay? The first ones are people that are already capitalized, where inflation rates don't affect them because their cash flow and their money is well situated. And so these people reach for the checkbook a lot quicker during the recessions because they're going shopping and everything's on a discount for them. They have set up their life and their business to take advantage of the blood in the streets. That's when the most money is to be made. You could hate that, you could like that, you could be indifferent to it. It doesn't matter. What matters is there are people right now who are buying things up at higher rates, quicker, and more ravenously than they ever will in any other market condition. So if you want to survive, find a way to serve them. That's not the only segment, though. If you think this is just selling to rich people, I want you to think again. There's a certain segment in all these different consumer markets that I've been in who have been lulled into this false sense of security that you get when markets are typically at equilibrium. That's when people literally think things like Social Security are going to be there for them in the future. And they start to think that their financial advisors are really actually going to create a situation for them to retire safely. And they think that the retirement plans are going to be working and that the banks have their back and that these educational systems are actually in their best interest. And they're not, they never have been. They're highly exploitative institutions that put their best interest in themselves first before everybody else's. And they typically are spread very thin. They're house of cards that don't work under scrutiny and with pressure. And when the recession hits, they're exposed. And people say, wow, I got to take things into my own hands. I can't be reliant on just handing it over to somebody else and hope they got me. Because even if those people have the best intentions, it becomes very clear that it's a dangerous situation to put yourself in to absolve your responsibility. And you feel that during a recession. So you say, damn it, I'm going to change things this way. I'm going to take more responsibility in my own hands. And so you start seeking your own solutions as opposed to just pushing it off. So you become in the market for a whole variety of new opportunities that previously you weren't a buyer towards. So sellers of those opportunities will see an uptick in demand and sales during recessions. So I think, how do we serve both markets? How do we serve the people that don't really care about a recession? In fact, they get excited about recessions because they make even more money during a recession. And how do we work with them and serve them if we feel comfortable doing such a thing? Ethics aside, right? And by the way, you can rationalize it a million different ways. I'll leave that to you to figure out. And to me, the most important market to serve is the market that has been awakened by the matrix. They've taken the red pill and they realize if it's meant to be, it's up to me. How do we empower that person who's finally willing to take more personal responsibility in their own life, to be more active rather than passive? And yes, it took a catastrophe or two for them to awaken to that. But now that they have awakened, how do we empower that individual? Lots of millions of dollars to be made looking at those markets. And they exist in every single market. There's a segment of such that exist. Let's serve them. Tip number 5, get more into the one-on-one. So if there's any time to emphasize sales over marketing, it is during a recession, because you get the added benefit of people are just freaked out of their minds. They're just scared to death. And if they can talk to a sober individual who can help ground them back into reality, that is going to be highly beneficial and highly valued, independent of whatever it is you sell. In fact, people will start making up reasons to do business with you and giving you money, more so for the therapy you provide and perhaps the sense of community that you can cultivate. So there's no more fertile ground to create a very tight-knit community than during a recession. Now, you should obviously consider creating communities in any conditions, but more so the seed of the community that exists to create the tightest, most valuable community happens during a recession. And it starts one individual at a time. So you work with this person, you work with that person, you work with this person, then you start putting them together. You have like-minded people. They're empowered and they're united by a thread that becomes a strong golden thread, becomes a huge community. The other reason you should do one-on-ones is for no other reason than you really learn what your market wants. Your market will tell you, and it's almost never what you think it is or what anybody else talks about. So when times have gotten tough and I've sat there and talked to my customers one-on-one and I could now hear the heartbeat of the market, I thought, I never thought that this is what really matters. It's never the obvious thing. And then I go out there and I start putting marketing out that nobody else can understand because they didn't talk to customers. They're making assumptions based on old, outdated information, not the fresh, recession-based information that's creating these thoughts. Most of them are rational in the marketplace. But we can communicate with the starting communication around that irrationality and then build it into a rational conclusion. And you win doing that, and you serve more people with that approach. Tip number 6, prepare for it in advance. And I know that's not useful if this one snuck up on you and smacked you over the head, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a tip. It will happen again in the future. Winter comes and then spring comes, just the way that the world works. So you will see contraction and then you will see expansion. Then you will see contraction again. So this ain't the only time it's happened. It won't be the only time that it's happened. It will happen again. Will it happen in a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now? I don't know. But I do know that very often when times are good, people believe they can continue doing business the same way indefinitely, and that kills them. So when times are good, the next time, dig the well before you're thirsty again. Start saying to yourself, what are things I can do when times are right to prepare for the next winter? If there was ever a time to prepare, it's when things are at their best. So I knew no matter what, whether a pandemic was going to hit or not, that the world was going to go virtual. It was just so obvious. So I wanted to be ready for the world before they ran en masse into the virtual world. And I used to tell real estate agents this all the damn time. I say, listen, you got to get to the virtual world. You can't just rely on the old way of doing things. It's going to get you one day. And then when the pandemic hit, nobody could show a house anymore in person, and they had to make this mad dash to try to figure out how to do it virtually. I was like, damn it. This is why I try to sell you guys so hard. I tried to sell you 6 years ago. I didn't think it would happen because of this reason or this black swan or that black swan, but I knew inevitably that it would happen. Damn it. And so plant the tree before you need the shade. I'm going to tell you this. So when it happens to you once, don't let it happen to you again. It's okay that it happens to you once, but if you haven't learned and it happens to you again, oh my God, we're going to have a conversation, my friend. So prepare for it the next time. If there's ever a time to ever consider building infrastructure, it's when you're at your very best. But people just keep trading up until they hit the top and then they fall off. It's like the Peter Principle. I don't know if you ever heard this. The Peter Principle in the corporate world is when they keep promoting you till you hit your level of incompetence. So if you're good here, they promote you up, until you become incompetent. So essentially, everybody reaches a level of incompetency. And that's what happens with these businesses. When times are good, they keep spending more, they keep growing more, they keep taking on more, and then one misstep and the whole damn thing falls apart. And that's sad. And it can happen very quickly. So always have some sort of resiliency built into the business, because this will happen again, my friend. And next time, if you're ready for it, you can help people quicker, faster, easier, because you've anticipated it in advance. Number 7, and this is pretty much everything I've been doing up to this point anyway, is reframe the meaning of what a recession is. As I've told you before, a recession is just another opportunity to help even more people who need it anymore. A recession is an opportunity where new things come online that previously didn't exist. And so what I love about business is first mover advantage. It's one of the greatest tactical principles that you could ever adopt. Don't be better, just be first. Now, in normal conditions, there's not a lot of new opportunities that pop up that you're going to be aware of, because better capitalized and more connected businesses than you typically get the first mover advantage. They have a significant advantage over you. But in a recession, all bets are off. All sorts of weird opportunities pop up in places you wouldn't think. And first mover advantage is more given to the person paying attention than the person that's already entrenched and well established. This is why disruption is ripe during a recession. And who benefits the most from disruption? The little guy and the little gal who's most agile, who doesn't have the old mode way of thinking that gets in the way of the new opportunity. So if nothing else, say to yourself, how can I change something that I look at right now negatively? And how do I see the upside? Where is new opportunity? Because there's always new opportunity in any market. But the best time to take advantage of new opportunity is during a recession. It's the most level playing field that you could ever hope to play under. It's the best chance to help the most amount of people. So you could worry about what might happen to you, or instead you could worry about other people who aren't being helped, who will continue to be in pain until somebody like you can come along and help them. And if you help the right audience, they'll be more than happy to pay you for it. So that's how you win in a recession. Let me know your thoughts on this. I'll see you in the next video.